Have you ever felt powerless? Like no matter how hard you try, the world refuses to listen? What if I told you that strength isn't always about size or power, but about persistence and intelligence? Stay with me till the end, because this story will change how you see your own potential. In a small village surrounded by vast fields and ancient trees, there lived a tiny ant. She was no different from the others in her colony, small, overlooked, and seemingly insignificant. The world was vast, and she felt like nothing more than a speck of dust in it. However, fate had other plans, for one day, an incident changed the way she saw herself forever. Once upon a time, the ant was wandering near a large tree, collecting food for the winter. Suddenly, a strong gust of wind blew, knocking a grain of wheat into a deep crevice of the tree's bark. The ant had worked hard to find that grain, and she was determined to retrieve it. The towering tree stood firm against the wind, its deep roots anchoring it to the earth. It had stood in that place for generations, witnessing the changing seasons, sheltering countless birds and animals in its branches. The ant, though minuscule in comparison, knew she had a right to her grain. As she climbed the rough bark, her tiny legs carried a determination far greater than her size. Despite her best efforts, the grain remained lodged between the cracks of the bark. The tree, indifferent to the struggles of such a tiny creature, paid no attention to her plight. The ant knew she needed help. She scurried away, crossing the dense undergrowth in search of someone strong enough to help her. Soon, she reached a nearby village where a skilled woodcutter was sharpening his axe under the shade of a banyan tree. The woodcutter was a man of great strength, known for cutting the largest trees in the forest. His arms bore the marks of years of labor, and his hands were rough from gripping the handle of his axe. The ant, looking up at the giant figure, felt a twinge of doubt but reminded herself that even the smallest creatures have a voice. She crawled up onto his boot and made her way to his ear, hoping to convince him to help. As the woodcutter wiped sweat from his forehead, the ant tried her best to make herself heard. She explained how the tree had taken what was rightfully hers, hoping the woodcutter's strength would aid her. But the woodcutter was unmoved. He had more important things to do than cut down a tree for a single grain of wheat. With a sigh, he returned to sharpening his axe, leaving the ant feeling smaller than ever. She refused to give up. If the woodcutter would not help, perhaps someone even more powerful would. Determined, she made her way to the village chief. He was a wise man, sitting in his grand house, surrounded by villagers who sought his guidance. The ant waited patiently and then climbed onto his table, standing before him with all the courage she could muster. The village chief listened, but his concern lay with matters far greater than a single grain of wheat. He had disputes to settle, roads to repair, and decisions to make. A small problem like hers was insignificant in his eyes. He dismissed her, sending her away without a second thought. Frustrated but not broken, the ant continued her journey. She decided to seek out the elephant, the mightiest creature in the forest. If anyone could make the village chief take notice, it was the elephant. She found the great beast resting beneath the shade of a tree, its large ears flapping lazily. The ant approached with newfound hope, explaining her plight. The elephant, though kind, had no reason to get involved in such a minor issue. He had his own concerns. Avoiding hunters, finding food, and ensuring his herd was safe. He did not see why he should risk his comfort for the sake of a mere grain of wheat. Once again, the ant was dismissed. Yet, the fire inside her burned brighter. She had been turned away by those who held great power, but she realized something important. It was not brute strength, high status, or size that determined success. It was persistence. She decided she would find another way to get what was rightfully hers. She recalled a small yet clever sparrow that often flew over the village. The bird was known for its wit and ability to find solutions where others saw none. The ant climbed onto a rock near a pond and waited for the sparrow to arrive. When she finally did, the ant explained everything. The lost grain, the tree's refusal, the woodcutter's indifference, the chief's dismissal, and the elephant's unwillingness. The sparrow listened carefully, nodding in understanding. She agreed to help, but in her own way. The next morning, as the village chief prepared to mount his elephant for a grand procession, the sparrow swooped down and pecked the elephant's ear. The large beast, startled and irritated, let out a loud trumpet and stomped his foot, shaking the ground beneath them. Startled, the village chief lost his balance and fell. The commotion caught the attention of everyone in the village, including the woodcutter. The chief, now covered in dust and embarrassed, demanded to know what had caused such an incident. The sparrow, perching nearby, chirped that the root of the disturbance was the ant's lost grain. Faced with such a peculiar situation, the village chief, the woodcutter, and even the elephant had no choice but to acknowledge the ant's persistence. The woodcutter finally walked to the tree, preparing to cut it down. Seeing this, the tree, which had stood so stubbornly before, relented. It released the grain, letting it tumble down onto the soft soil. The ant, overwhelmed with relief, retrieved her grain at last. She had not relied on brute force, intimidation, or authority. She had simply refused to back down, thinking creatively and using her determination to move forces far greater than herself. The mighty tree had refused her at first, but in the end, it had surrendered to her unwavering spirit. This story teaches us an important lesson. Strength does not always come from size or power. Sometimes, it is persistence, intelligence, and strategy that create real change. The ant seemed weak in the face of the mighty tree, the skilled woodcutter, the powerful village chief, and the enormous elephant. Yet, through determination and resilience, she proved that even the smallest creatures can make the biggest impact. Challenges in life may seem impossible to overcome, but if you stay determined, think creatively, and refuse to give up, you will find a way. No problem is too big when faced with courage and strategy. If this story inspired you, take a moment to reflect. Have you ever felt too small or weak to make a difference? Remember, persistence and intelligence are your greatest strengths. Share this story with someone who needs motivation today. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more inspiring stories that remind us of the power within.